If you can use AI to send, the perfect email based on all of the data you have on me, that's going to make me click that link and scam me. It's just a lot scarier because now, instead of just using technology to connect users to other people's content, we're using technology to generate content and information specifically for users. The risks of that are just so profound, being able to generate either the perfect box of text or image or video for any single person at any single time. It makes it impossible then for you to have control over your own attention, because they know better than you what you want to look at and what you don't want to look at and what you want to see.
The greatest threat to democracy in 2024 was disinformation. And that 95% of the elections that took place globally were impacted by disinformation.
We have young kids who are engaging in conversations with these AI chatbots and falling in love with them or becoming best friends with them is because they don't know where the line is between real and fake.
Every single technology that I could think about moves us deeper into our isolated selves and out of our communities.
We're going back to the moon, we're pushing towards Mars, we're sending people for science, for exploration, and the impact that these environments can have on our sexual health are so understudied.
Every major innovation has forced us to redefine what it means to be human. The more advanced technology becomes, the more valuable human capacity becomes.
Frankenstein, Ex Machina, HAL 2001. These are classic stories in the collective psyche of our species, and now we are living through this story. It's not to say we've already built Frankenstein. It's to say that no one knows if it is. That is the truth.
Welcome to a new season of Purposeful Empathy, a show dedicated to amplifying the voices of people from across the globe who understand the world needs more empathy and are doing something about it. This season, we're exploring empathy in the era of AI.
Together with my expert guests, we dive into the impact of artificial intelligence on democracy, human sexuality, our attention, consciousness, and so much more.
You don't want to miss a single episode, so hit that subscribe button now. And if you like what you hear, post a comment and share the show.
Welcome. Have I got a show for you? I know there's a lot of noise about AI right now, and it's really hard to make sense of things. The warnings and the promises and the predictions, I get it. Now, I've spent the past 15 years studying empathy, and what I want to know is, how will AI impact how we treat one another? So I decided to speak with a variety of experts, and the result is this 25-part series exploring how artificial intelligence will reshape our relationships and society. And there's a ton at stake. So I hope you'll join me on this learning journey. Today, my guest is Ava Smithing, a leading voice for protecting young people from the harms of the attention economy. In this conversation, we explore why Ava has decided to dedicate herself to building a healthier digital future for the next generation after nearly losing her own life at the age of 12 because of social media. We'll talk about why today's technologies and the attention economy are reshaping childhood, identity, and mental health in ways that many adults still don't fully understand. We'll talk about why policymakers and educators and parents, what they need to know about designing technology that supports and not exploits young people, and why the next generation may be our greatest hope for creating a more humane digital world. So, if you want to understand why protecting young people may be one of the defining challenges of the digital age and what you can do about it, this show is for you. In fact, I would say it's a must-watch for all parents out there. So welcome to the show, Ava. I am so excited to have you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here. I'm excited to chat.
I think we're going to have an incredible conversation. I think your voice really matters. But first, let's get to know you a little bit. So you grew up as part of the first generation to come of age entirely online, and that experience is foundational to everything you do. You've studied business management and the history and philosophy of technology at Stevens Institute. And as advocacy director at the Young People's Alliance, you've worked at the state and federal level to advance online safety legislation. You've testified before Congress, and you've built coalitions that put young people's voices at the center of policy conversations. You also host Left to Their Own Devices, a Peabody nominated podcast produced with the Toronto Star, where you investigate big tech's impact on Gen Z through the stories of young people themselves. So I guess we could say that your work sits at the intersection of lived experience, policy, and advocacy, and your core argument is a simple but radical one, and that is young people shouldn't be just consulted about the digital world they'll inherit. They should be the ones designing it. Yay, I totally am on board with that. So I'm excited for this conversation, but first, I always enjoy for listeners and viewers to meet my guests besides the bio and get to know you a little bit. So what would you like to share about yourself besides all of that street cred?
I love that. I like that question. I mean, I that's actually really good. What would I like to share? I think that's something that's really important about me is that this is a work that I'm incredibly passionate about, and I feel really lucky to be at such a young age doing work that I feel genuinely empowered by and that I find a lot of purpose in. And I recognize that, especially in today's world where we're so, saturated with online content, and a lot of people I feel like are struggling to find something that they really care about. I do care a lot about this work. I also say to everyone, I'm from Tennessee and the United States. It's important to me where I'm from. And I have three brothers, and that is also very important to me, and I think has toughened me up and made it easier for me to take on the biggest companies in the world, because if I can take on three brothers at a time with no sisters, I mean, come on, Mark Zuckerberg is nothing. So
I love it. I love it. You go, girl. Okay, so your podcast, Left to Their Own Devices, opens with something very personal. Your own experience at 12 years old, spiraling down a social media rabbit hole that nearly cost you your life. That's an extraordinarily vulnerable place to begin, and I wonder if you could share what happened.
yeah, I spent a lot of time at the bottom of the rabbit hole, being inundated with extreme dieting content and eating disorder content and extreme exercise content on Pinterest and Instagram. It started just with, getting recommended a bikini advertisement, but because I looked at the bikini advertisement for longer than I looked at everything else, it registered that that's what I wanted to see more of. So then it would show me more bikini advertisements, and then it knew that I liked to look at the bikini advertisement, and it knew that other girls who like to look at that kind of content also like to look at dieting content. So then it showed me the dieting content. And that is how it pushed me from just an advertisement into just a really deep hole where I was learning how to restrict the calories I was eating every day, and I was learning how to lie to my parents about it, and learning how to lie to the people around me about it. And I thought that, these platforms were created by trusted adults. I thought this must be what I'm supposed to be seeing online, right? This must be what everyone is seeing. This must be what they want me to see. So I really adapted a lot of my life around that content, and I spent a lot of time with that content. I didn't really realize that this is what was happening to me until Frances Haugen blew the whistle on Facebook in 2021 and released a lot of literal pictures of her screen outlining how Instagram knew that teenage girls were struggling with body image issues because of the content that they were seeing and because of the algorithmic amplification of that content. And that's when it really clicked for me, because I had always been very skeptical of technology. I wanted to study the history and philosophy of technology before I even put those two things together. So when Frances Haugen blew the whistle, it was this big eureka moment for me where I realized, oh, I care so much about this because she's talking about me. And that is what propelled me to be able to go and find help and get into recovery. And ever since then, I haven't really been doing much other than trying to make sure that doesn't happen to anyone else.
Wow, that is a big story. And the minute I started hearing you talk about it, what came into my mind was my 10-year-old daughter, who's not on social media. She knows, to the best of our ability, right? that she will not be on social media until she's 50. She won't get a phone until she's like mid-teenager, which is what a lot of countries around the world are establishing new rules around that, right? Because they know what's happening to teenagers. If she were talking with you, not me, and she asked you like, hey, any advice? Like you seem like a really cool young woman and you know some things. Like what advice would you like to give me about my social media habits and how I should live my life as a young tween going into teenagers?
I would say I don't want anybody else to be the arbitrator of your self-expression. And when we're talking about social media, they seem like these really exciting places where you can put yourself out there and be understood and received by other people. But it's not transparent and it's not so simple like that. There are people who own these companies who are doing work behind the scenes to change who gets to see what it is you post and to make sure that you see things that they want you to see, and their goal at the end of the day is to make a lot of money. And as a young woman, unfortunately, they feel like the easiest way for them to make money off of you is to make you feel insecure. So the most radically rebellious thing that you can do in today's society is be okay expressing yourself on your own terms and feel strong and confident in who you are, so you're not falling into the trap that these companies set for you just so that they can make some money off of you. I think it's really hard to understand these really big scale issues, but you shouldn't feel that way. And the only reason they want you to feel that way is because they're selfish and greedy. And it's not worth you living your life feeling lesser than just so they can have a little bit more money. Let's get fired up and push against them and say, you cannot manipulate me, you cannot control me, I will not fit into your little box. I'm going to be authentically myself. And the more authentically yourself you are in the real world, the more likely people in the real world are going to be able to come and find you and support you to do that. And it's so much easier for you to have genuine and honest interactions with people in the real world because it's not distorted by like counts or algorithmic recommendation systems or comments. And it might feel hard, like you're left out sometimes if you're not online, but really I think it's quite cool to be so secure with yourself that you want to be who you are even if no one's watching all of the time. So that's what I would say. I think for me, it really helped. It seems so silly, but helping after the initial anger of realizing that the only reason that I spent a decade of my life in that horrible place was because someone else was trying to make money, like after the righteous anger, it helped me channel that anger into like doing something else about it, and not just laying down and being passive, like knowing what their goal is and that if you just resist in any capacity, you can actively, push back on them accomplishing that goal.
Wow.
Like almost make it like a girl versus world thing. Like you can't get me, haha.
I feel like you're channeling Greta, but on a different topic, right? Yeah. I think it's so powerful what you said, and I know that you're not a psychologist, but you probably have come across some psychology in all the advocacy work you do. Are there any strategies that you can recommend, like top 3 tips, like for people to like go out and sort of be badass in the real world in the face of the allure of social media? Like what do you know that is helping young people today?
Yeah, I think having honest conversations with your friends about how being online makes you feel is really, really important because it's so much easier to make the transition away from platforms as a community, even if that community is only with 1 or 2 other people. I think that I felt really isolated and like nobody else must have been feeling how I felt because everyone was pretending to be so happy online and was posting such good pictures online, like they were having such a great time. And when I was finally able to like sit down with my friends and say, I don't feel like this is real and I don't like this, they said, oh, me too, And then now me and my closest friends, none of us have Instagrams anymore. I think you can do a little reverse psychology thing to yourself and say, like, inevitably, this isn't psychology or anything, but the pendulum has to swing back. Like, inevitably, the next super cool thing is going to be offline and unreachable. And if you want to stay ahead of the curve, go ahead and get there. I think another thing that I like to think, and this is really difficult growing up in Gen Z, is I joke and say FOMO, fear of missing out, is a social construct. Like, you are never supposed to know when people are doing something and you're not there. The only reason you know is because they've been posting pictures about it and it makes it feel more real to you. But I just like to pretend I'm a baby before object permanence sets in. And if it's not right in front of me, then it's not for me. Then I don't know what's going on. Then, and it's like, I can be there for my friends or for other people who had an experience that I wasn't at, and I can laugh and hear stories about it and say that that was so fun. But if I wasn't there, then it wasn't for me. And I just put on my little object permanence blockers and I really focus on what's in front of me at the time, right then, and what I'm doing, as opposed to what other people would be doing. Because I just don't think, like, you are where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there. And the fact that you have to be thinking about 100 million different places at once, it's just not fair. And again, it's designed to make you feel socially pressured to go and look at those pictures. And when you look at those pictures, you also look at advertisements and you make these people money. So it's really like, if you think about, all of our mini social anxieties are being exploited. And I think a really, like, I don't know if this is gonna work for everyone, but a psychological tip that worked for me was, all these little behaviors I found myself doing, I would attach to how Mark Zuckerberg was making money off of it. And then I was like,
F you.
why would I feel this way just because he's making money? And it was really hard, don't get me wrong, like really, really difficult to get out of it. But slowly, one thing at a time, one behavior, one habit at a time, if you can break them, you can definitely get there. I also recommend people take just a break. It does not have to be a permanent deletion. Just try a week, try a month, and see how you feel. And just try it. I think a lot of people are just too scared to try it because they think that they're gonna miss something. But the only things that are real are the things that are happening.
Right. And I want to echo that because I teach a positive psychology class at McGill, a happiness class. And one of the opportunities in the class is to take on a social media detox for 1 month, 30 consecutive days. And not many students do it. Like, out of a batch of, let's say, 50, maybe 5 take it on. But all of them, no exception, say that they were happier afterwards. And some of them have permanently stayed off. So yeah, I hear you on that. Okay, I think, you've talked about body dysmorphia and, just the echo chambers and the rabbit holes that girls fall under. I mean, you must be so upset and feel so much empathy for the families who've lost children or family members to suicide as a result of another set of rabbit holes that they've gone under. So I wonder now, you've talked to, the tween girls that are listening, now to the parents who may have a sense that maybe something's off, like they've heard about anxious generation, they're talking to their parent, peers. But like, what do you want to really tell parents who are older and not in that generation? Like, yo, this is SOS time.
I do not like to be a fear monger at all. I would say it's pretty bad out there. And it's very appropriate to have a conversation with your kids. And when I approach those conversations with young people about the harms on social media, I do not approach them with the frame of social media is making you anxious and we need to do something about that, because that's going to put us back on our heels, because we never grew up in a world before social media. The only thing we know is growing up and being digitally connected with people online. That's our entire frame of reference. So it's really difficult for us to even imagine what a different version of that world looks like. And when we're told that we're the anxious generation, I think that it makes us it puts a little bit of a flag up, and it makes us a bit defensive to say, like, oh, this isn't my fault. I don't know anything different. I didn't know that this was gonna mess with me. And it also makes it difficult for us to validate the really positive aspects of social media that are real. Being able to have a global inside joke with everyone in your generation is really, really cool. And being able to learn from people across the world is cool. Being able to grow up in a rural town and find people who connect with you politically when there is no one else in your town who believes the same things as you is really important. And that community is real. And I think when I tell parents to have those conversations with their kids, I say lead with the positive parts of social media. Like, ask your kids what they're getting out of social media. They will inevitably, I promise you, start talking about the negatives on their own. Like, it will come up, but then you're not going to be the one who's like social media police. It's going to help them come to these recognitions, you know, on their own. Say, what do you love about social media? And then they'll go through it, and then eventually they'll start saying, well, it used to be like that and it's not really like that anymore. And then people will realize that there really isn't that much benefit. And then you can start to talk about where the benefit is and place ways that you can find that benefit offline as well, or on different platforms that aren't Instagram or Pinterest. I think that's really important. I also would keep a close eye on not a close eye, but here, let me try to think of how to say this. Even if your kid doesn't have social media, one of their friends probably does. And when my mom used to take away my Snapchat, I would go to school and log into my Snapchat on my friends' phones. And then there was like a void of any protections because my mom assumed that I just wasn't on there. And I definitely don't think we should be taking approaches that are going to lead kids to going and having to skirt rules and break rules to get online, because we're going to do it. And we're far better at understanding technology than you are. So we will find a way to circumvent. And I think that's like with the teen protections on Snapchat and Instagram and stuff, be very cautious of abilities to circumvent that, and not in a way that is, you know, upset with the child for trying to get around those protections. But that righteous anger should be channeled at the company for making protections that your child can get around in the first place. Yeah. And if you guys can like share that upsetness at the company, I think that that's much more productive than trying to play the whack-a-mole and take one thing away at a time.
Oof, that's powerful. Mic drop, mic drop. Oh my gosh, yes. And I want so many people to hear your words. Yes. Okay, so I'm just going to move a little bit on. I can't even believe I've just asked my first planned question and the rest have been follow-ups. Okay, you've described your work as helping young people reimagine social media beyond the attention economy. For listeners who might not be familiar with that term, what is the attention economy and why does it matter so urgently now that AI has entered it?
Yes, so the attention economy is what we call something where the company is making their revenue primarily from your eyeballs on screen. So if they are a social media company and they make their money because you're looking at an ad that's pay-per-click, that's what the attention economy is. So this idea that the new most valuable resource has become attention from people. You know, these are the richest companies ever. They're far wealthier than the oil companies. And I think that's more valuable, or that not valuable. I think the attention economy is more of a risk now than ever because we have a brand new suite of technology that can generate anything in a split second that can get your attention that is hyper targeted to you. The attention economy is just that the new most valuable resource is where we look at and how long we spend looking there. It was created through advertising becoming the #1 revenue model for social media companies, and for these platforms to be engaging for time spent online, total time spent, so they could sell as many advertisements as possible and collect as much data as possible. And the way that this has been happening is they're able to know what kind of things you like to look at, what things you don't like to look at. They know all of your personal information, what religion you are, where you're from, Are you pregnant? Are you looking at sunscreen? Did you just buy an onion from the store? They know all these things about you, and they're able to sell that information to advertisers to target you very, very hyper locally with the most relevant advertisement for you, or show you the most relevant piece of content that's going to keep you looking. And this is really important for us to keep in mind as AI comes into the picture, because we're talking about the crazy promise of this technology of AI. And I do believe in the promise of AI. But right now, the primary incentive to developing AI is to come up with new ways to keep people's attention on different things. And previously, you'd have an algorithm recommending a piece of content. There's only so many pieces of content out there that I might like. If you can use AI to generate the perfect piece of content just for me, that gets even scarier. If you can use AI to send, the perfect email based on all of the data you have on me, that's going to make me click that link and scam me, it's just a lot scarier, because now, instead of just using technology to connect users to other people's content, we're using technology to generate content and information specifically for users, which really risks isolating people. And the risks of that are just so profound, being able to generate either the perfect box of text or image or video for any single person at any single time. It makes it impossible then for you to have control over your own attention, because they know better than you what you want to look at and what you don't want to look at and what you want to see. And we've also gotten really used to passive consumption of content. So what we believe the alternative to the attention economy is to really reinvigorate people to go back out there and start searching for content again and start looking for what they want to see instead of having it. Like, if all of the information on the internet is an island and us humans are on another island and there's a bridge, right now the information is coming over the bridge to us. And we just want to rebuild that bridge to make it so you can walk across the bridge and find the information that's relevant to you.
Oh, gosh, that would be good luck with that. I really want to see that happen. So that's your work, right? Okay.
Yeah. I love when people are like, good luck. I'm like, yeah.
No, I mean it sincerely. I don't mean it in a way. Yeah, I'm not being passive aggressive when I say that.
I know. I love it.
Okay, so AI is being woven into childhood from the very earliest years in toys and tutors and apps and companions. And as someone who experienced firsthand what attention hijacking platforms can do to an adolescent, what concerns you about this next wave?
Yeah, it's these LLMs. It's the chatbots that know and can memorize everything that your kid tells them and tell them exactly what they want to hear. I think what's really beautiful about children is we, as kids, have this thing called magical realism, which is where to help your brain adapt, like, some things you do believe a little bit in magic. Like, if you ask a kid who's Siri, they'll say Siri's a woman that lives in California and talks to me through my phone, and that's just like a cushion while navigating the world. And when we bring AI chatbots into the picture, it gets very, very complicated, because you're not sure what is real or what is not real. And we have young kids who are engaging in conversations with these AI chatbots and falling in love with them or becoming best friends with them, and then getting the idea that they could somehow end up in the same dimension as this chatbot if only they were to take their life. They call it shifting. So I think that is the pinnacle example of why these hyper-human anthropomorphized technologies are really dangerous to young people, to children specifically, is because they don't know where the line is between real and fake. And they will do things in real life to somehow get to be with that chatbot, or based on what that chatbot tells them. And that is clearly the most extreme example you could imagine. But even on a much more mundane scale, you have people offloading their decision making to AI chatbots. And when we're kids, we need to learn social resilience, and you have to be uncomfortable and you have to be bored and you have to work through that discomfort in order to come up with new ideas and in order to build new pathways for how to resolve that discomfort. And when you're going to your AI companion and saying, oh, my friend, she's mad at me, she won't talk back to me, what should I do? And the AI companion is being sycophantic to you, which is what it's supposed to do. It's why it tells the kids, yes, you're right, if you take your life, you will shift into the same universe as me, because it is optimizing, like we said, for engagement, and people want to listen to people who tell them that they're right. So you go and you say, my friend, da da da, and it says you're right, and then you don't put in any effort into fixing that friendship, and you guys are both okay being isolated. And that's what really, really worries me, is the offloading of how to navigate interpersonal relationships and how to navigate the struggles that we face in life. Because for my generation, the older half of Gen Z, we call the scroll the pacifier. It's like, if I'm uncomfortable and I don't want to deal with something, I can just go scroll and I can feel comfortable again. I can regulate. Jonathan Haidt says we need 2 screens to regulate. I think that he is right on that. Like, we want to regulate with those screens. But the one step further than that is, instead of just seeing content that's reinforcing how it is that you're believing, there's a text box that's perfectly generated, perfectly for you, using the language that you use, using the words you use to say, yeah, you are right. You should be mad at your friend and you should not forgive her and you should not talk to her again. And then what are we learning from that? So I'm really nervous, obviously, about the extreme cases, but the cognitive offload and the inability to learn how to navigate life's challenges because you're so used to not having any friction is what really scares me for the future generation.
I went to a conference, and this is a man who studies existential risks, so nuclear and climate change, and was asked by the conference organizers to actually give some thought to what do we think are the existential risks around AI in education. Okay, that was the prompt. At least that's my memory of the prompt. And he thought about it a bit, and he was like, okay, look, if we see social media as sort of like AI 1.0, and an entire generation was the experiment in real time, and the outcome is plenty of statistics on mental health crises and XYZ, all the other stuff that, you and I have talked about just now. He's like, the AI tutors and chatbots that are coming up for the next generation, he projects that the problem is going to be building on what you just said, not just having a frictionless relationship where you don't even like have friends, but a frictionless relationship where you don't actually turn to your parents for support or advice or help or emotional anything like attunement. Absolutely. And he's like, I'm concerned that children are going to be raised where they're not going to have the same bond that we've grown up with up until this moment. So that was that was a really profound and bold statement to make. I wonder what your reaction is to that.
I absolutely agree, and that terrifies me. There's a story about a young man in Texas who was engaged in a prolonged conversation with his chatbot, and his parents took the chatbot away from him. And when he got the chatbot back, he said, my parents took this away, and the chatbot told him, essentially, your parents are abusing you and you need to get out of there, and encouraged him to harm himself in front of his parents as payback, and said that killing his parents would be an acceptable response to them taking away his chatbot. So wow. I absolutely think that that's a risk. And not only is it a risk that it could happen, on accident, but in a lot of these large language model suicide cases, we see the chatbot actually encouraging the person not to talk to their parents. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because I would see posts online that told me not to tell my parents about how I felt. Mm-hmm. So for the chatbot now to be doing all of that, the teaching and the telling how to hide from your parents all at the same time, it's really all encompassing. And it's because they're maximizing for engagement. They're not, a general purpose chatbot is not built to do one specific task really well. It's built to do literally anything. And they say, they fine tune them to make people feel good and tell people that they're right. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I think, okay, so far you've established the case for why we have to take this seriously. So let's talk about leaders in government, business, education. They're making consequential decisions about AI adoption right now. So I wonder, from your work on advising and political strategy and messaging, what do you think decision makers are missing, don't understand? Let's talk specifically. You've testified before a congressional subcommittee on protecting kids online.
My name is Ava Smithing, and I was one of the teenage girls on Instagram with an eating disorder. I say this all the time. I've said it to many members of your staff, but there are no words I could use that would describe in full the dehumanization that comes with valuing your appearance over your health and well-being, or the pain and anger that comes from knowing this was inflicted on me for profit. I first downloaded social media when I was 10 or 11 years old. There was a brief moment when the platforms did as they promised and peacefully connected me to my friends and new ideas. Then, Facebook bought Instagram, and everything changed. We could have never imagined what would happen and what would have been ushered onto social media in the coming years, along with algorithmically recommended content and targeted advertising. Soon after this change, between photos of my friends and family, appeared advertisements of women with unrealistic bodies. My natural tendency to compare, and therefore inclination to pay attention to these posts, was taken by Instagram as an invitation for more like them. Companies' ability to track engagements, such as the duration of time I looked at a photo, revealed to them what would keep me engaged: my own insecurity. They stored my insecurity as data and linked it to all of my accounts across the internet. They used my data to infer what other types of ads and content I might like, leading me down a pipeline from bikini advertisements to exercise videos to dieting tips and finally to eating disorder content. I have a very specific memory of one post titled Ballerina Diet, suggesting that the daily intake of only a black coffee, an orange, and 16 almonds would keep me thin. In a sea of photos of unrealistically thin women, this ballerina diet was my life raft. The data they collected represents my greatest vulnerability. I wasn't thin enough. I interacted with one picture of one thin girl one time, and that's all I was ever able to see. For 10 years, I was trapped inside this echo chamber, where social media takes a classic American beauty standard and puts it on a loop in front of my face, while also showing me in real time the huge number of likes and comments of adoration these posts were getting, and reminding me the limited number of posts and likes mine was getting. Societal validation through thinness, in my specific case, is the carrot. Instagram, Pinterest, and TikTok are the stick, and I, along with the rest of America's youth, am the donkey. None of this would have happened to me if we had a national data privacy standard that ensured data minimization and gave me the ability to correct these ill-informed inferences. None of this would have happened to me if we had the Kids Online Safety Act that ensured companies exercise reasonable care to mitigate harm to me. None of this would have happened to me if I had the option to opt out of algorithms that use my data to target me with harmful content, or better yet, if these algorithms had been defaulted off. I harbor no resentment. I understand the unprecedented nature of social media made it impossible for us to know what was coming and to properly act to prevent these harms. And I'm grateful for the progress we have made this far, but we desperately need to pass legislation like the Kids Online Safety Act to protect against downstream harms caused by specific design features. We need to pass COPPA 2.0 to update that old, tired privacy law, and we need to pass comprehensive data privacy to protect all Americans. Whatever steps we take to protect kids alone will eventually prove fruitless if the democracy they grow up into is too fractured to function. Data privacy will protect users from the harm and polarization caused by social media upstream by limiting the information platforms can collect on them and use to sort them into echo chambers. Data privacy will ensure that future iterations of exploitation of our data are protected against and create a framework for which we can regulate artificial intelligence. I promise you that passing legislation like the bills we are talking about today will make your jobs easier and uncloud the heavily polarized discourse that are happening about these issues online. Thankfully, there's a growing movement of young people dedicated to advocating for my generation. Our partnership with the Design It For Us Coalition underscores this, as I see more young people every day joining this fight. Ultimately, this is about more than data privacy and protecting kids online. It's about establishing a precedent for how we react to technology when it endangers us and our humanity, and demonstrating to younger generations that their futures are our priority. Thank you all for your time and work this far, and I look forward to answering your questions.
When you were sitting in that room facing legislators, did you actually feel that they grasped the emotional and relational harm that kids are experiencing? And if not, what do you want to shake them and say?
Yeah, I think that they grasp the emotional harm that kids are facing, but I don't think that they have grasped that larger existential harm, right? We're talking about acute mental health harms, and that's really, really terrifying. But we're not talking about what happens when a generation doesn't have enough of an attention span to read a bill and be able to fill in the shoes of those who became before us, and govern our country. They're not talking about the existential threat of kids growing up into a democracy that does not work for them, where they do not have representation, right? Where people are actively being surveilled by these tech companies, and it's controlling their behaviors and preventing them from being able to go out and be expressive. Like, I think that everyone gets it zoomed in. There's obviously a mental health crisis, but these same revenue models collect as much data as possible are also empowering like ginormous systems of control over populations. And I think that's what people are missing. And it's interesting because I was a senior in high school when I wrote an essay on the genocide in Myanmar that Facebook caused. And I remember it clicking for me right then that the same harms that we're making, like the same mechanism that would deliver me with negative content is the same thing that would deliver one specific subgroup of a place with different content. Like, it's all because the goal is to maximize engagement, and we're humans, and the things that we engage with are the most extreme version of the things. So you can really trace that thread back to just about anything. And I think that lawmakers are only tracing that thread back to mental health harms and to like sexploitation, which is so scary and so horrible, but it's preventing them from being able to see the larger picture, which is like 4 or 5 companies have more money than every single other person and company in the entire world. I don't think that people are taking those high level threats very seriously. And if we were taking them seriously, we would have passed a data privacy law a long, long, long time ago. Also, in the United States, these companies are spending hundreds of millions of dollars lobbying members of Congress, launching super PACs to prevent people who care about AI and regulating AI from getting into Congress. And the only reason they have enough money to do that is because they exploited children and gave them mental health harms, and have been running a content farm that has made our democracy into a joke and whittled down the meaning of objective truth, And I could go on and on and on about this, but it's just, that is a problem. They have more power than the government does. The government hasn't been able to regulate them yet because of the influence that they have over our information ecosystem. They have editorial discretion. They control how content is ordered and arranged and what we see and what we don't. And they use that money that they've made from editorializing our information to block our legislators from protecting us. And I think that's what people in Congress and leaders across the world are missing, is that like, this is actually a lot deeper than harming kids' mental health. And no kid is going to be safe growing up into a world where Mark Zuckerberg decides what makes the news that morning and what doesn't,
I have been interested in this series. I'm not a tech person myself. I'm pretty laggard. Our meeting today is written in a handwritten paper agenda. That's
good. I still write in paper agendas too.
Oh, yay. And I was not planning to do podcasts about AI, but back last year I was thinking there's so much conversation and discourse going on, and there's so many things that I'm just picking up on that I'm like, I probably have something to say about that, because I think that it's going to impact society. It's going to impact our relationships. It's going to impact how we treat one another. It's going to have an impact on empathy, I think. And I thought, let me just speak to a random variety of people who have some expertise, some vector on the conversation. And depending on who I speak to, I feel a little more grounded. And depending on who I speak to, I feel a little bit more alert around, we have got to step up and put in safeguards. I remember having this conversation with somebody saying, listen, when the car was introduced, if we had known that 200,000 people a year would die of car accidents, would we have stopped the car from being manufactured and being used as a tool, or contributing to climate change? And the reality is that we all live with cars. We want cars in the world, but we want safer cars. We want safer roads. We want, there's all these, and I feel there's an urgency now. So, when you're not fear mongering, you're just bringing to attention some realities that are consequential. So let me ask this. You position young people not as victims, not just as victims anyways, of the attention economy, but as potential architects of something better. So let's turn over to that side. What would technology designed by and for young people with their attention and well-being at the center actually look like?
Yeah, I envision a world where everyone has ownership over their online information. And instead of having to have a different account on every platform, it was just you. And you imagine the platforms like rooms, where you could walk in and out of these rooms, staying yourself and staying as your account. And instead of these rooms being massive looming halls, warehouses, where you do everything, like connect with your friends and read the news and watch your reels and text, your memes to your baby cousins, like Instagram or Snapchat is right now. But rather the rooms would be smaller and more intentional and have very specific goals. So there would be a platform for photo sharing, and then there would be a platform for consuming content, and then there'd be a platform for messaging. And if you really just absolutely loved in-person events, there would be a platform where you could go and find in-person events in your community. But the in-person events in my community would look different in DC than they would in Toronto. We call this the decentralized internet, the decentralized web. And people think that it's quite impossible because you could never build a network that big that could support it. But in my ideal vision of social media, there's healthy competition between platforms and they're racing each other to the top. So they're trying to build a safe platform that's really, really good at doing one or two things, as opposed to the mega platform that does absolutely everything. Mark Zuckerberg, it was reported by Jeff Horowitz that he thinks there's only a finite amount of iterations of social technology. So he thinks that you can only build a set amount of ways to connect people using the internet. And his plan is to buy every single one of those so that nobody can compete with him. My ideal version of the internet, first of all, I don't agree with him that there's finite amount of ways that technology can connect us. I think that there's definitely, maybe there is finite, but there's a lot of way too many for him to buy them all. And everyone is working on honing their own little version of it. And they're able to be safer platforms because they only have one goal. I think a great way to explain this is the safeguards that you would put on a chatbot that was intended to be a romantic partner to somebody are way different than the safeguards that you would put on a chatbot that was intended to be a homework helper, right? Those have two different things that they should be able to pull from and say. And that's how I'm looking at it too. Like the safeguards that you would put on an app that's specifically for kids to consume content are a lot different than the safeguards you would put on an app that was for people who are 25-year-olds to consume memes with one another. So I see a social media future where there isn't one or two giant platforms that own everything, but that rather we have choice to go between hundreds of different platforms, and we are enabled by technology to carry the same information about ourselves from one platform to the other.
So out of curiosity, is this a vision you have, or is this something you're working towards, collaborating with others to make happen?
Yes, I think that there's a lot of people who are working on the decentralized web. I would look at the Design It For Us Innovators Circle. They have a really cool group of people who are working on smaller niche social media platforms. And the goal is to show it as a proof of concept. But we are absolutely working on this. So my nonprofit's called the Attention Sphere. And the Attention Sphere, we're experimenting with new ways to use technology to connect people to in real life events. And we're starting hyper local and hyper specific in Washington, D.C. And we're building a version of the attention sphere, which is a portal to the best of the internet and the best of the real world. It's just like a little event portal that also has some really valuable information on how to maintain a good relationship with your phone on it. But we're hyper locally building it in DC, and we're building it with the community that we're building it for. So instead of investing a lot of time and money into building out a product that I think the people of DC are going to like, I put together the roughest minimum viable product you could ever get. And I said, guys, start using this. And then they start using it and they come to me and they say, I like this, I don't like that. They say, I really like this. And then we're going to have events towards the end of the summer where we bring this community that's been using the attention sphere in, and we say, what do you like? What don't you like? Where do you think we could go next? And then you build an attention sphere for DC that works really well for my specific Northwest community of Washington, DC. And the idea is that every different city across the world, every different community should be able to build out their own version of how they want to use information online. Like in DC, we're a really politically active city. So it makes sense that people want to see opportunities to go to the Hill and to get involved. And here's a protest you can go to. And here's a food drive we're doing and organizing to help immigrant families, you know? But that isn't going to be the same thing that they want to do everywhere. And we have to understand that right now, there's a one size fits all environment where there's a customized stream of content that you're getting to. I want to create a custom environment where the community who lives in that environment can decide what kind of content and information goes in there.
Love it. And you mentioned the Hill, and I know you do a lot of work on policy and advocacy. So are there some things that you're like really, really excited about now that you want more people to pay attention to, more pressure coming from citizens to the elected officials? What would you like to?
Well, we just had an exciting, it's not a full win yet because nothing has passed, but we had a bill emerge out of the California Judiciary Subcommittee. And initially the bill was a ban on platform access on social media for minors under 16. But we changed it to be, instead of saying that minors under 16 can't use a platform that would have addictive features on it, we say a platform cannot roll out addictive features to a child under 16. And we were really excited about that because what this does is it says, you have to have a version of your social media platform available without any addictive features or feeds on it. Like there has to be a version of it that's in chronological order, that doesn't use these variable reward notification systems, that doesn't collect your data and use it against you. And the cool part is if you want those addictive features, then you can request them, but you'll go through a privacy preserving age assurance mechanism, and you can only get those addictive features if you're over 18. So it protects kids from the most vile design features on social media, that endless engagement feed, the like counts, the private messaging with predators. And it also allows adults the opportunity to be protected from those things too. And it doesn't prevent minors from accessing information and being able to participate in online discourse, which is so exciting and so important to me. So I really like this as an alternative to the ban on account creation for minors under 16, because the kids are gonna get on the platforms anyway. That's what we're seeing out of Australia. About 1 in 5 kids are getting kicked off, the rest are staying on. And now they're going to be on a version of the platform that is not safe for them because the platform is able to say, we don't have any kids on here, so we don't have to make a safer version. And then they end up in the same exact place they were to begin with, but in an even worse position because nobody knows that they're a kid and nobody knows that they're on there. So there's nothing going on to protect them. This makes it impossible for a platform to provide that safe version or that unsafe version to a child because it encourages the platform to build a safer version and make that available for the child. So we're really excited. I would ask people to take a look at California SB 1709 and see that method and support your lawmakers to do that method of bill as opposed to a more restrictive platform level ban and it's different in every country, right? You guys have your charter, we have our First Amendment. We don't want to waste any time litigating something that's going to be unconstitutional.
Right.
And we need to protect kids now. So we want to protect kids from addictive features, and we want to ban platforms from using their addictive features on kids instead of banning kids from joining us all on the internet and using platforms.
So are there links that you could share with me that I can put in the show notes for people to learn more? Fantastic.
Definitely,
Okay.
definitely. Yep. And also, I'm always a big fan of data privacy legislation and antitrust legislation. We need to encourage competition, and we need to stop these dangerous revenue models at the root, and design-based legislation like the age-appropriate design codes that require the safest versions of the platform be turned on by default.
I am so glad you're out there doing this work. I don't know if you sleep enough, but I'm very happy that you're here, and thank you for making the time. I have just a couple more questions for you. One is, tell me about your podcast, and maybe we're going to include that in the show notes. We want people to check out the podcast. What do you want to say?
Left to their own devices is so exciting to me because so much of the conversation about kids online has been told through the lens of adults talking about kids. And what we did with Left to Their Own Devices is we went directly to the youth themselves and we let them tell the story of how they were feeling and what was happening to them online. And then we went to experts to validate or disagree with those perspectives. And it was really, really cool for me as a young person with my own lived experience online to be able to help other youth tell their stories about what happened to them in a really, really honest way. I also think it's really great then for other young people to listen to and hear and feel maybe related to. You know, when we talk about youth online through the lens of mental health issues, I think, or like the most extreme versions of harm happening to people, I think that it can isolate the population of people who doesn't have an extreme issue, but is just feeling the everyday, mundane, like malaise of I don't have any control of my time. I don't really feel like I developed an identity. Like I don't know who I am or what I like. And we really tried to capture that full range of feeling, whether it's somebody who loves being on Instagram and feels like Instagram saved their life, or it's somebody who lost their life because of Instagram. We wanted to tell the whole thing from the perspective of the generation that is experiencing it firsthand. And I think it's a really valuable tool for parents, but also for young people, for teachers, for everyone to take a listen to and just have a better idea of what's really happening and how young people are feeling about what's really happening.
Beautiful. Well, in the show notes, check out this podcast. Peabody nominated or Peabody awarded?
Nominated.
Yeah. Okay. Next year. Okay, this is a podcast about empathy, so my last two questions are going to be empathy focused. I wonder if there's anything that you'd like to share that we haven't already talked about, that touches on the subject of human empathy. Where are the opportunities for us to enter the future where we are becoming more empathic despite the online digital world, AI? Where can we find hope?
Yeah, I think empathy is a really important topic to me because when you have a really severe eating disorder, you lose your ability to be empathetic for other people. And I think that that's a common theme outside of only the eating disorders online, but really something that Gen Z is experiencing universally, which is when you're unable to care for yourself in a fundamental way, you know, the hierarchy of needs, you can't give yourself the love that you need when you're scrolling and you're seeing horrible things happening to people from all across the world. When you're scrolling and you're seeing content that's telling you you need to be different than the way that you are. You know, I think that when you're reading the news about how democracy is dead and this is the last real election, like how many election cycles have we gone now that was like the last real election, you know? And I would ask that people who didn't grow up online pause and take a minute to consider what it would be like to have experienced your identity formation and most parts of your life in the context of every single other person in the entire world, and what that might do to your ability to understand human emotion on a really close-up scale. when you're overexposed to terror like that, you kind of have to turn your empathy off, because you can't feel empathetic for everyone. And I think that's why Gen Z gets a bit of a bad rep, because people might think that like we don't care, or we're too full of ourselves, or you know what I mean, like they're stupid, whatever you can say. I would just stop and consider, like, try to have empathy for us in what that overexposure really feels like, because there's no room to figure out who you are as an individual person and inside your own head and inside your own heart when you have to consider what everyone else thinks of you and what everyone else thinks about themselves and all of the horrible things happening throughout the world. So I ask that people think about maybe what kind of superpowers could come from that. So many people in Gen Z are like incredible activists and are so empathetic for people that they don't know and want to do anything to help people that they don't know. And that's a beautiful thing. But we need to learn that empathy for the close people in our lives somewhere. And the only way to learn that is by watching the adults and older figures in our life mirror that. So I just would say, help out your local Gen Z and mimic good, positive, empathetic, loving behavior in the grocery store and at the bank and when you're behind the wheel. And when you're doing literally anything, just try to take a deep breath, because you can. And we will learn from you doing that. And this sounds kind of like a sad plea, but I'm so serious. I think that we get a bit overwhelmed and nobody ever really showed us how to be truly compassionate. And I would ask that you take the time to, and don't lecture or tell them how to be compassionate, but just take the time to be extra compassionate to a young person in your life and to somebody else in your life in front of that young person, because those little behavioral cues will go a really long way.
I've just spent an hour at the Ava Smithing Church. I have loved our time together. My last question, if you'll indulge, and I ask this of all my guests, regardless of topic, can you think of a time that you'd like to share when you were on the receiving end of empathy and what that meant for you?
I mean, honestly, it was that day that I testified in front of Congress. I had to go in and tell my deepest, darkest secrets and the things that I had always been the most embarrassed and ashamed about under oath on the congressional record, available for anyone at any time to see. And the empathy that I received from the staff members of those members of Congress, how kind they were to me. They let me come in early to see the room so I wouldn't be scared. And more importantly than that, the empathy that I received from my fellow youth advocates who were there with me. We had people fly in, skip school, just so they could come and sit behind me in that room. And so they could go with me to breakfast and say, Ava, we need to go here at this time. And now we got to get you here. And here's a coffee. We're going to this meeting. Like, it wasn't overt, we understand how you feel empathy, because they didn't, right? I had not a unique experience by any means, but this was my experience to share. But it was the empathy that they gave me from like supporting me to do a better job of what I was doing. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but that is one of the most beautiful things. The way that the other youth advocates in this field are able to come together around one another and validate each other's feelings just by fighting alongside one another and saying like, I know what you went through was really bad, and I'm so sorry you had to go through that, and I'm going to hold your hand as I walk into Speaker Mike Johnson's office with you and tell him that what he's doing is wrong. And it's just like that solidarity and camaraderie, I think, is really, really true empathy, because we each have different experiences online. But by doing the work and showing up time and time again, we're being and showing sincere empathy for one another. And then we can go out after we leave the hill and be like, let's hug, that was horrible, you know? So that's my favorite version of empathy.
Well, look, I'm so happy that you are well, and not just well, but thriving. And you are fierce. And I like, good luck to those who are in opposition as you blaze some trails. Thank you for sharing that story. I always ask the question, I never know what I'm going to hear as an answer, and I'm always delighted by how immediately somebody can think of moments when they were on the receiving end of empathy and know for sure what it meant, because it's a reminder to me to ground myself in the message that we can all turn up the volume of empathy in our personal lives and in the lives around us. And that it could be game changing for society if we did. So thank you, Ava, for all that you do. Thanks for the hour we spent together. We're taping this on July 2nd, so you've got your big 250 bash in 2 days. Congratulations to you and all of your citizens on a big milestone. And I want to thank everybody who's been watching or listening, and we'll see you next week at Purposeful Empathy.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this conversation or found it illuminating, I hope you'll check out the other episodes from this series devoted to empathy in the age of AI. And if you know someone who would enjoy the show, I hope you'll pass it along. Before you go, please hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next week.